I woke up because something was wrong. At first, I thought it was part of a dream, one of those half-formed sounds that leaks through sleep and doesn't quite belong to the real world. A thin, broken noise, wavering, almost mechanical. Then it sharpened, it gained breath, it cracked. A baby was crying. I sat upright in bed, heart already racing, the clock glowing 2:07 a.m. in dull red numbers. The sound wasn't loud. That was what made it worse. It came from close, too close, right outside the wooden slats of my bedroom wall. I lived alone. I stayed very still, listening, hoping it would stop. Hoping my brain had invented it, the way it sometimes invents footsteps when you're half asleep. But the crying continued, weak, uneven, desperate. There are rules you learn when you live alone long enough. One of them is this: if something happens at night, don't go looking for it. I broke that rule almost immediately. I reached for my phone, my fingers clumsy, and turned on the flashlight. The beam shook as I pushed myself out of bed. My apartment was barely an apartment at all, more like a converted shack. Thin plywood walls, an open living space where the outside world never quite felt outside. Wooden grills instead of proper windows. You could hear people cough on the street if they tried hard enough. I hadn't planned to live here. After the fight with my father, nothing felt planned anymore. We hadn't spoken in months. The words from that night still echoed louder than the baby's cries did now. If you walk out that door, don't come back. So I hadn't. Pride is a terrible roommate, but at least it doesn't yell. The crying hiccuped, turned hoarse. "Hello?" I whispered, hating how small my voice sounded. No answer, just the baby. I stepped into the living room, my bare feet cold against the concrete floor, and edged closer to the grills. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness outside. Empty street. Closed shops. Christmas lights still blinking weakly on a lamppost, like they hadn't gotten the memo that no one was celebrating anymore. Then I saw her. She was wrapped in a thin, stained blanket, placed carefully against the wall as if whoever left her had tried, at least a little, to keep her hidden from the wind. Her face was red and scrunched, her tiny fists opening and closing with useless fury. She couldn't have been more than a few hours old. My stomach dropped. I didn't feel brave. I didn't feel kind. I felt trapped, like the universe had shoved a question into my hands and refused to take it back. The crying grew weaker. "Okay," I said, to no one. "Okay, okay." And just like that, without understanding how or why, my life split into a before and an after. I stood there longer than I should have, staring at her like she might vanish if I looked away. She didn't. She just cried, softer now, the way people do when they're running out of energy. "Hey," I whispered, crouching down. "Hey, it's okay." It wasn't okay. I didn't know what I was doing. I'd never even held a baby before. My hands hovered uselessly over her blanket, afraid that touching her might somehow make things worse. But the crying didn't stop until I finally reached out and lifted her. She was impossibly light. That was the first thing that hit me. Not fear, not panic, but how little she weighed. Like she wasn't finished becoming real yet. Her body was warm, though, and when I pulled her against my chest, her crying broke into uneven gasps. "Shh, shh," I murmured, rocking without thinking. My heart hammered so hard I could feel it in my throat. I looked up and down the street again, half expecting someone to step out of the shadows and yell that this was all a mistake. No one did. The city stayed asleep. Inside my apartment, I laid her down on my bed, the blanket spread carefully beneath her. She squirmed, her face twisting, her mouth opening and closing in frantic little movements. She was hungry. Of course she was hungry. I opened my fridge. Empty. A half bottle of water. Soy sauce packets from takeout I'd stretched across 3 days. No milk. No formula. Nothing remotely useful for a newborn. Okay, I said again, louder this time, like volume might summon an answer. Okay. I wrapped her tighter in the blanket, then hesitated. Leaving her alone felt wrong. Taking her outside felt insane. But doing nothing felt worse. I strapped the blanket around my chest as best I could, clumsy knots and uneven folds, until her head rested just under my chin. She let out a small, broken sound, then went quiet, exhausted, not satisfied. I grabbed my wallet and keys and stepped back into the night. The walk to the 7-Eleven felt longer than it ever had. Every step bounced her slightly, and every time she stirred, panic shot through me. People stared. A man on a motorcycle slowed down, frowned, then sped off. A woman behind the counter blinked at me, like she didn't quite believe what she was seeing. "Formula," I said, my voice cracking. "Do you have, I don't know, baby food?" She looked from me to the bundle on my chest and back again. "What happened?" I don't know," I said. "I just found her." She handed me the smallest can of formula they had and a disposable bottle. "Good luck," she said softly. I didn't feel lucky. I fed her sitting on the curb outside, my hands shaking so badly I spilled more than she drank. She sucked weakly, eyes closed, trusting me in a way that made my chest hurt. I reached the hospital, close to 4 in the morning. The nurse at the desk took one look at me and sighed, not unkindly, but not surprised either. "We can check her," she said, already standing. "But we can't take her." "What do you mean you can't take her?" I asked. "She's stable, and you're the one who found her." I looked down at the tiny bundle in my arms. I didn't even have a name for her. I didn't know what I was supposed to do next. She scribbled something on a clipboard. "We'll call you." "When?" I asked. "When we can," she said, meeting my eyes for just a second. "Leave your number." I wrote it down with fingers that barely worked. No one told me what to do next. The baby slept through it all, her tiny chest rising and falling against mine. By the time I stepped back outside, the sky was beginning to pale, the gray-blue color that feels less like morning and more like a reminder that time doesn't care what kind of night you've had. I walked home slowly, afraid that if I hurried, something would break. Back in my apartment, I sat on the floor with her in my arms, surrounded by thin walls and unanswered questions. I had no plan, no idea what came next. I didn't really sleep. I drifted in and out, sitting upright against the wall with her tucked into the crook of my arm. Every time her breathing changed, my eyes snapped open. Every sound outside, footsteps, a tricycle engine, a dog barking, felt like a warning. When morning finally arrived, it didn't bring relief. It brought clarity. The light filtered through the wooden grills in thin, pale lines. Dust floated in the air. The baby stirred, her face scrunching up before she made a sound. Small, insistent, alive. "Hey," I whispered, "I'm here." My voice sounded different to me now, older, tired in a way sleep doesn't fix. I warmed the remaining formula as best I could and fed her again, slower this time. She drank more, her tiny fingers curling around nothing, gripping the air like she was afraid of falling. After that, I just sat there. I watched her breathe. I counted the seconds between blinks. I tried not to think about how permanent this all felt. My phone buzzed. For half a second, hope surged through me. The hospital. Answers. A handoff. An adultier adult stepping in to fix everything. It wasn't them. It was a neighborhood group chat I barely paid attention to. Mostly noise complaints and lost pets. Someone had posted a link to a news article. Woman found dead early Christmas morning. I don't know why I tapped it. Maybe part of me already knew. The article was short, clinical, no poetry in it at all. A woman in her early 20s, found on the side of the road 2 streets away from my apartment. Severe blood loss, signs of recent childbirth, traces of drugs in her system. Police believed she had given birth alone and attempted to seek help. She didn't make it. My chest tightened. The article mentioned that authorities were searching for the newborn. I looked down at the baby in my arms. She slept, her mouth slightly open, one tiny fist pressed against her cheek. There was nothing dramatic about her, no sense of destiny, just warmth, just weight. "I'm sorry," I whispered, though I didn't know who I was apologizing to. The article didn't say her name. It didn't say whether she had been scared, or alone, or hopeful enough to leave her baby somewhere visible, somewhere safe. But I knew. I imagined her standing in the dark, bleeding, shaking, telling herself just a little farther, placing the baby down gently before forcing herself to keep moving. And failing. I closed the article and turned off my phone. That afternoon I started asking questions. It didn't take long. People like to talk when tragedy feels distant enough. Someone recognized the description. Someone else knew where she'd been staying. By evening, I had an address. Her family lived across town. The house was bigger than mine, clean, decorated, lights on in every room. Christmas ornaments still hung in the window like nothing had happened. A woman answered the door. She looked at me, then at the bundle in my arms, and her face hardened instantly. "What do you want?" she asked. I think this is your granddaughter," I said. She laughed. Not a happy sound. "That's impossible." I told her the name from the article, the street, the time. Her expression didn't soften. It sharpened. "That woman hasn't been part of this family for years," she said, "and neither is that." Another man appeared behind her, older, heavier, angrier. "She chose drugs over us," he said. "She chose that life." "She died," I said quietly. He shrugged. "She made her choices." The baby stirred, letting out a small sound. The woman recoiled. "Don't bring that thing here." "That thing." Something in me snapped. Not loudly, not violently, but completely. "She's a baby," I said. "She didn't choose anything." The door slammed shut in my face. I stood there longer than I should have, the weight of her pressing against my chest, the house silent again, like I'd never been there at all. On the walk home, she woke up and cried. And for the first time since I found her, I cried too. Child Protective Services came 2 days later. I'd spent the time in between in a fog, feeding, changing, pacing the room until my legs ached. I learned quickly how many decisions a baby demands every hour, and how none of them come with instructions. I named her nothing. I couldn't bring myself to give her one yet. Names felt like promises. The woman from CPS arrived with a clipboard and a practiced smile. She took off her shoes at the door, glanced around my apartment, and made a small noise in the back of her throat. "So?" she said, sitting across from me. "You're the one who found her." "Yes." "And you've been caring for her since." "Yes." She looked at the baby sleeping against my shoulder. Her expression softened, just a little. "You've done a good thing." That sentence should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like a trap. "What happens now?" I asked. "Well," she said slowly, "that depends." I waited. "We can place her in temporary care," she continued. "But it's the holidays. Resources are stretched." "How stretched?" She didn't answer directly. "You're already providing a stable environment." "Barely," I said. "I live alone. I work odd hours. I don't know what I'm doing." She smiled again. "No one ever does at first." There it was. The subtle shift. The way the responsibility slid back toward me like it had always belonged there. "I can file a formal complaint," I said. "About the hospital. About—" She nodded. "Of course, that's your right." But her tone told me exactly what that would cost. Time, paperwork, interviews. Weeks where this baby would remain exactly where she was, because I was the only option that existed right now. "Adoption?" I asked. "That's something we can discuss," she said. "Later." Later felt like a word designed to make people quiet. She left me with pamphlets and a number to call if I had questions. As she stepped out the door, she turned back and said, almost gently, "She seems comfortable with you." After she left, I sat on the floor and stared at the wall. This wasn't a decision I'd made. It was a decision that had been left. I could fight it. I could argue. I could demand someone else take over. But every path away from her required time I didn't have, and energy I was already spending just keeping her fed and warm. That night, as I rocked her to sleep, she reached up and grabbed my finger. Her grip was weak but deliberate. Something settled inside me then. Not certainty, not joy. Acceptance. "I'll figure it out," I whispered. "I don't know how, but I will." I gave her a name that night. I won't say it yet. Not because it's a secret, but because names deserve to arrive when they're ready. And somehow, in a room with thin walls and a future I hadn't planned, we slept. I named her on a Tuesday. It wasn't dramatic. There was no sign, no sudden certainty. She lay on the bed between me and the window, sunlight cutting soft lines across her face. Her eyes were open, unfocused, taking in shapes that didn't mean anything yet. She made a sound, not a cry, just a breathy noise, like she was testing the idea of having a voice. "Lila," I said. It slipped out without effort. She didn't react. Of course she didn't. Names are for the people who say them, not the ones who receive them. Still, I said it again. "Lila." Something in my chest loosened. Life didn't transform after that. It just continued. Louder, messier, more expensive. I learned how to hold a bottle with one hand and answer emails with the other. I learned how to nap in 10-minute increments. I learned that exhaustion and happiness can exist in the same body without canceling each other out. We moved to a slightly bigger place after the first year, still cheap, still thin walls. But it had a real window, and when Lila learned to stand, she pressed her palms against the glass and laughed at birds like they were telling her secrets. Money was always tight, love wasn't. She learned to walk by holding onto furniture and stubbornness. When she fell, she looked at me first, checking whether the world was still safe, before deciding whether to cry. I passed that test more often than I deserved. School came faster than I expected. She asked questions that didn't have answers yet. Why the ocean moved, why the lights stayed on, why some people were kind and others weren't. At night, she'd sit at the small table drawing waves over and over again, big ones, small ones. Ones with strange machines floating on top. "This one makes power," she told me once, tapping the page seriously. I smiled. Of course it does. Years stacked up quietly. Birthdays, report cards, scraped knees, first heartbreaks that felt like the end of the world. I watched her grow into herself the way you watch the tide. Slow, inevitable, beautiful, if you stop long enough to notice. She found out about her past when she was old enough to ask. I told her the truth, all of it. I didn't dress it up. I didn't poison it either. She listened. She nodded. She cried once, alone in her room. Then she came out and hugged me like she was afraid I might disappear. "I already know who my family is," she said. I believed her. The rest of the world found out who she was much later. She built things, studied harder than anyone I'd ever met, talked about energy and oceans with the same excitement other kids reserve for games. When her company finally succeeded, when the headlines started using words like breakthrough and revolutionary, I read them quietly, sitting at the same small table where she used to draw waves. People came out of the past then, blood relatives, names I recognized from slammed doors and bitter words. She listened, then she stood up. "I'm not your redemption," she said. "I'm his daughter." She married in the spring. The ocean was behind us, restless as ever. She asked me to walk her down the aisle, and my legs shook so badly I thought I might fall. She squeezed my arm. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said, "just proud." That night, after the lights dimmed and the guests left, I sat alone and thought about a sound in the dark, a cry I could have ignored. Sometimes I still wonder what would have happened if I hadn't gone outside that night, but not often. People like to tell stories about miracles as if they're loud, as if they arrive with certainty, with music swelling in the background, as if you know in the moment that your life is about to change forever. That night didn't feel like that. It felt like fear. It felt like inconvenience. It felt like standing in the dark at 2 a.m, wishing the sound would stop so I could go back to sleep. I didn't think I was saving anyone. I thought I was surviving, 1 hour at a time, one bottle, one choice that didn't feel like a choice at all. If I'm honest, I didn't just find Lila that night. I found myself too. I had left my father's house convinced I was unlovable, that if someone knew me well enough, they'd eventually tell me to leave. That love was conditional, temporary, fragile. Then a baby wrapped her hand around my finger and trusted me with her life. And every day after that, she taught me something I hadn't known how to believe before, that staying is a form of love. Years later, when people ask me how it felt to raise someone who would change the world, I tell them the truth. I don't know. I just raised a girl who liked waves, who asked good questions, who learned kindness by watching it practiced. The rest was hers. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear that sound, the echo of a cry that cut through sleep and demanded an answer. I think about the man I was before it, the one who could have rolled over, the one who almost did. I think about how close I came to missing everything. My name is Daniel, and on a quiet Christmas morning, in a small apartment with thin walls, a baby saved me just as surely as I saved her. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminded you that sometimes the smallest actions, just showing up, just paying attention can change someone's life forever, and maybe even your own. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to the channel, leaving a like, or sharing it with someone who might need a little hope today. Your support helps me keep telling stories that matter. And if you have a story of your own, big or small, I'd love to hear it. Comment below, and let's share these moments together.